Yesterday marked the beginning of the 45th general election. Free and fair elections are a cornerstone of Canada's democracy, and the government has been planning diligently to protect the integrity of our election and defend against foreign interference.
Oh, really?
Today, I'll be sharing with you how the government will address threats and how we will communicate with Canadians during the election period if foreign interference is detected. The Honourable Marie-Josée Hogg stated in her final report on foreign interference in federal electoral processes and democratic institutions that Canada's democratic institutions have remained robust and that the Government of Canada has responded to attempts at foreign interference with measures and mechanisms to better detect, deter, and counter them. One of these measures has been the critical election incident public protocol, which was activated again yesterday with the issuance of the writs.
Good afternoon. Concerning the protocol and the panel, I'm trying to divine whether there's any change from the last time in terms of the threshold, or is it identical to the 2021 election in terms of a threshold for having a public announcement?
Turn that over to you, Al.
Yeah, so thanks very much for the question. I would say that each election is slightly different because the context in which it operates is different. In this case, the panel's threshold, as Lorianne correctly explained, remains high for panel announcements. But I think what you also heard from her is a greater involvement of the Government of Canada as a whole in engaging transparently on issues where there might be mis or disinformation. So while the panel announcement remains a very high threshold, I think you'll see a more active Government of Canada response, and that response is in fact organized by the panel in their various capacities as senior leaders of the public service, but also in their mandate as part of the Caretaker Convention.
We recently saw a couple examples, perhaps during the Liberal leadership campaign. Is that the sort of thing that you're alluding to, the kind of announcements about the rapid response mechanism in Ms. Freeland's campaign? That's sort of public pronouncement?
Very much so. In fact, if you go even further back at the various by-elections that occurred, the previous Prime Minister activated site for the last 12 or 13 by-elections. And in that process, you saw instances where the government stepped forward and called out different types of foreign interference. Again, during the Liberal leadership, where the site was again activated, you saw again a public announcement of an example of foreign interference. This is really an example that we hope has test run the approach that we'll use for this election.
Hi, thanks everyone. A question about the threshold for reporting an incident. You talked about this a little bit. I just want to try and get some more clarity from you on this point. During the inquiry, it was obviously raised the issue of whether something had to be national in scope or whether we could have an incident at a single riding level that was serious enough that it should be triggering public statements such that sort of maybe it doesn't sway what party wins, but it might sway who the MP is for a given seat, and that is unacceptable as well. You were sort of talking about how your thinking has changed, how the protocol's been refined given what you learned at the inquiry, but could we now see a warning that is just about something happening in one riding? Your criteria, if you could just lean into it a little bit more and describe it in more detail. I think it's important for people to understand how you've adjusted this threshold based on what the inquiry said.
Yeah, happy to. It's important to distinguish between a panel announcement, which is triggered when something threatens the integrity of the election, and you correctly laid down kind of the polar range, the poles in the range of that. It could be a very impactful level of interference in a single riding, or indeed it could be national. But if it's those sorts of things that threaten the integrity of the election, whether it's in one or just a handful of ridings or across the country, could be something that in the panel's judgment, in their nuanced judgment, requires them to initiate the protocol. And if that were to happen, they would make an announcement to Canadians. At that announcement, they would do a couple of things. They would explain what has happened to the best of their ability, subject to some of the national security concerns that you heard. We're never going to put our human assets at risk, and we're not going to kind of undermine our national security through the announcement. But they will tell Canadians what they can about what has happened, and they will also try to help Canadians understand what they can do to avoid being impacted. So that's the classic panel announcement. And just to be clear, it has never been triggered because it's never had to have been triggered, which is a great thing for Canadian democracy. So as Justice Hogue found in 2019 and 2021, there was no need for the panel to step forward. What Justice Hogue went on to do, and what is impacting kind of what you'll see this time in the 2025 election, is the need to perhaps be a little more proactive in calling out smaller instances, less impactful instances of perhaps mis and disinformation. And the idea is, that transparency is the best sunlight, that this is something that helps Canadians make an informed decision, and that together with the other reports, whether it's the Hogue report, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians report, the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency report, or we've got the CSIS and CSE reports, that together Canadians can get a fuller picture of mis and disinformation and can properly understand that, they are potentially impacted, and to understand when that impact occurs, how they can protect themselves by not sharing this information and not allowing it to impact their vote, so that Canadians' elections remain for Canadians.